You're 32 and unmarried. Your brother's wife is perfect. You? Unlovable. Those words echoed through my mother's dining room as 43 relatives stared at their Thanksgiving plates. My father had just announced to everyone why I would never amount to anything, why I was the family disappointment, the cautionary tale, the daughter who chose career over motherhood. 2 years later, he walked into the most prestigious law firm in Chicago, desperate and broke, and the receptionist smiled warmly and said, "Ms. Victoria Lawson will see you now. She's our managing partner." The look on his face when he realized who she was talking about? I'll remember it until the day I die. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand exactly how I got here, and exactly what he took from me before I took it all back. I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, a suburb about 30 miles west of Chicago where success was measured by the size of your house and the letters after your name. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, where mothers compared their children's achievements at PTA meetings, and where my father's opinion was treated like absolute truth. Richard Lawson was a real estate developer. Not a particularly successful one. He built strip malls and small apartment complexes that barely broke even, but you'd never know it from the way he carried himself. He walked into every room like he owned it. He talked over everyone at dinner parties. He had opinions on everything and solutions for nothing. My mother, Ellen, was the peacekeeper. She spent her entire marriage smoothing over his rough edges, apologizing for his comments, pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I used to resent her for it. Now I just feel sorry for her. My brother, Christopher, was the golden child from the day he was born. 3 years younger than me, but somehow always 3 steps ahead in my father's eyes. He played football in high school, backup quarterback, nothing special, but Dad acted like he was heading straight to the NFL. He got a business degree from Northwestern, mostly because Dad pulled strings with an old friend in admissions. And he married his college sweetheart, a pretty blonde named Megan whose father owned a chain of car dealerships across the Midwest. Megan was exactly what my father thought a woman should be: beautiful, pleasant, and completely devoted to her husband's success. She quit her marketing job the moment Christopher proposed. She had their first child exactly 1 year after the wedding. She called my father Daddy even though her own father was still alive. Me? I was nothing like Megan. I was the quiet one. The one who read books instead of going to parties. The one who got straight A's but never got praised for it because, according to my father, grades don't matter as much for girls. The one who wanted to be a lawyer since I was 12 years old, when I watched my grandmother, my mother's mother, lose her house because she couldn't afford a good attorney after my grandfather died. I remember sitting in that courtroom, watching my grandmother cry as the judge ruled against her. She had no idea what was happening. The legal language went completely over her head. Her lawyer was some guy she found in the phone book who clearly didn't care whether she won or lost. I decided that day that I would never let that happen to anyone else. I would become a lawyer. A good one. The kind who fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Law school, my father laughed when I told him my plans at 17. We were eating dinner, pot roast, I remember, my mother's specialty. That's a man's profession, Victoria. You'd be better off finding a husband who's a lawyer. Times are changing, Dad, I said quietly. Not that much they're not. He pointed his fork at me like a weapon. You want to waste 4 years of college plus 3 years of law school? By the time you're done, you'll be almost 30. Who's going to want to marry a 30-year-old woman with massive student debt? My mother said nothing. She just passed the mashed potatoes like the conversation wasn't happening. Christopher smirked from across the table. I put down my fork and looked my father straight in the eye. I'm going to law school, I said. And I'm going to be the best lawyer you've ever seen. He laughed again, shaking his head. We'll see about that, sweetheart. We'll see. I didn't just prove him wrong. I demolished every single one of his expectations. I got a full scholarship to the University of Illinois for undergrad. I graduated summa cum laude with a double major in political science and philosophy. I worked nights at a law office filing papers and answering phones just to learn how firms operated from the inside. I scored in the 99th percentile on the LSAT. I got accepted to the University of Chicago Law School, one of the top 5 law programs in the entire country. My father didn't come to my law school graduation. Christopher's wife was having their second baby that weekend, and according to Dad, family comes first. The irony of that statement was completely lost on him. I graduated top of my class anyway. I passed the bar on my first try with a score that made my professors send congratulatory emails. I got hired at Morrison & Sterling, one of the oldest and most prestigious corporate law firms in Chicago. Starting salary, $190,000. Not that my father cared. Corporate law, he scoffed at Christmas dinner when I was 26. I had just finished telling my grandmother about a case I'd won, a small victory, but my first solo win in court. Sounds boring. When are you going to settle down and give us grandchildren? Christopher's wife was pregnant with their third child at the time. The whole family celebrated like she'd single-handedly cured cancer. My aunt made a toast. My grandmother cried happy tears. My father announced that he was setting up a college fund for all of Christopher's future children. Nobody asked about my case. Nobody asked about my recent promotion. Nobody asked if I was happy. I said nothing. I just kept working. The years passed, and I climbed the ladder at Morrison and Sterling, rung by rung, case by case. By 30, I was a senior associate on the partner track. By 31, I had won a case that saved a Fortune 500 company from a $400 million lawsuit, the largest victory in the firm's 60-year history. The partners started noticing me. They started including me in meetings I'd never been invited to before. They started mentioning my name in the same breath as future leadership. But every single family gathering was exactly the same. Still single, Victoria? When are you going to meet someone nice? You know, you're not getting any younger. The good ones get taken fast. Christopher's wife's cousin is divorced now. He's very nice. A dentist. I could set you up. I dated, of course. But the men I met either couldn't handle my 80-hour work weeks or couldn't handle the fact that I made more money than them. One guy actually told me I was too ambitious on our third date. Another said he didn't want to spend his life being introduced as Mr. Victoria Lawson. By 32, I had stopped trying altogether. I told myself I didn't need a relationship. I had my career. I had my apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. I had my life. I was fine. And then came that Thanksgiving. It started like any other November gathering. My mother's house was packed with relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, people I barely recognized from weddings years ago. The turkey was too dry, the football game was too loud, and my father was holding court at the head of the table like he always did. Christopher and Megan had just announced they were expecting their fourth child. Their fourth. Everyone was toasting them. My grandmother was crying with happiness. My aunts were already planning the baby shower. I sat at the far end of the table, nursing a glass of wine and counting the minutes until I could politely leave. Then my father turned to me. "Victoria," he said, his voice cutting through the celebration like a knife. Loud enough for everyone to hear. "Stand up. Let everyone get a good look at you." I didn't stand. "Dad, please. You're 32 years old now," he continued, completely ignoring me. 32. No husband. No children. No prospects on the horizon. The room went quiet. Forks stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. "Look at your brother," he gestured at Christopher, who was sitting with his arm around Megan's pregnant belly, looking insufferably smug. 4 kids. Beautiful wife. A real family man. That's what success looks like in this family. "Richard," my mother said quietly, her eyes pleading. "This isn't the time. And look at his wife." He pointed at Megan, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "She's perfect. She knows how to take care of a home. She knows how to support her husband. She knows how to be a woman." My hands were shaking under the table. "You?" My father pointed at me now, his finger like an accusation. "Unlovable. That's what you are, Victoria. You work too much. You're too intimidating. Too focused on your precious career. No man will ever want you." 43 people stared at me in complete silence. My aunts with their pitying looks. My uncles pretending to be fascinated by their plates. My cousins whispering to each other. My grandmother, who I had studied law to protect, just shook her head sadly like she agreed with every single word he said. Christopher didn't say a word in my defense. Not one single word. My mother stared at her plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. The silence was somehow worse than the words themselves. The silence told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in this family. I stood up slowly. My legs felt like they were made of concrete. I picked up my coat from the back of my chair. "Victoria, sit down," my father commanded. "Don't be dramatic." I didn't sit. "You're right about one thing, Dad," I said, and I was proud that my voice didn't shake even though everything inside me was trembling. "I do work too much. But I work too much to sit here and be publicly humiliated by a man who has never once told me he's proud of me. Not once in 32 years. That's not fair. I graduated top of my class. Twice. I work at one of the best law firms in the country. I've won cases that made national news. And the only question you've ever asked me is when I'm getting married." My father's face was turning an ugly shade of red. "A woman needs a family. A woman needs respect." I put on my coat. "Which I will never get from you." I walked to the door. "If you walk out that door," my father called after me, his voice booming through the silent house, "don't bother coming back." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. Part of me, the little girl who still wanted her father's approval, wanted to turn around. To apologize. To smooth things over like my mother always did, like I had been trained to do my whole life. But I thought about my grandmother losing her house. I thought about all the women I'd represented who had been told they weren't enough. I thought about every single time I'd sat at that table and swallowed my pride just to keep the peace. No more. Goodbye, Dad, I said. I walked out the door, got in my car, and drove 3 hours back to Chicago in the dark. The highway blurred through my tears, but I didn't stop. I didn't cry until I reached my apartment. Then I cried for 3 days straight. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom with your family, it frees you. I had spent my whole life trying to earn my father's approval. Trying to prove I was worthy of his love. Trying to make him see me as something more than a disappointment. Now? I had nothing left to lose. Nothing left to prove to him. I threw myself into work with a vengeance that scared even my colleagues. I took on cases other associates avoided. I worked 18-hour days without complaint. I slept in my office more nights than I slept at home. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, I was promoted to junior partner. A year after that, I won a landmark case that was featured in the Wall Street Journal. A tech company had stolen trade secrets from a smaller competitor, and I proved it beyond any reasonable doubt. The settlement was $750 million, the largest in Illinois history. The firm threw a party in my honor. Harold Morrison, the founding partner, raised a glass and called me the future of Morrison and Sterling. I didn't call my family to tell them. And then, 3 days before my 34th birthday, I got the call that changed everything. Victoria, Harold Morrison said, his voice warm through the phone. Can you come to my office? There's something we need to discuss. I thought I was in trouble. Partners never called associates to their office for casual conversation. Instead, Harold was smiling when I walked in. Victoria, the partners have been talking. We've been watching your work for the past 2 years, and we've made a unanimous decision. He slid a piece of paper across his mahogany desk. We want you to become our managing partner. I stared at the paper. At the title. At my name typed beneath it. I'm 33, I managed to say. 34 next week, he corrected with a gentle smile. And yes, you're young. You'd be the youngest managing partner in our 63-year history. You'd also be the first woman to hold this position. Why me? Harold leaned back in his leather chair. Because you're the best we have. You've brought in more business than partners twice your age. You've won cases everyone said were unwinnable. The clients love you. The associates respect you. The partners trust you completely. He pushed the paper closer. Say yes, Victoria. I picked up the pen with trembling fingers. I signed my name. The announcement made the front page of the Chicago Tribune business section. My face was on the cover of Chicago Lawyer magazine. I received congratulations from judges, CEOs, politicians, and even the governor of Illinois. My mother called to say congratulations. Then, in the same breath, she asked if I had met anyone special lately. Christopher sent a one-line text, "Congrats, sis." My father sent nothing. For the first time in my life, I genuinely, truly didn't care. The next 18 months were a blur of triumph. I restructured the firm's entire litigation department. I brought in 15 new corporate clients. I established a pro bono program specifically for domestic violence survivors. I mentored young associates, especially the women who reminded me of my younger self. I was on the short list for a federal judgeship. I testified before Congress on corporate regulatory reform. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. Or Christmas. Or Easter. I sent cards. I sent gifts for the kids' birthdays. But I didn't go back. And then, on a completely random Tuesday in March, my assistant buzzed my office intercom. Ms. Lawson? There's a walk-in consultation request. A Mr. Richard Lawson. He says it's urgent. My blood ran cold. Did he say what it's about? Bankruptcy, ma'am. He says he's about to lose everything. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone. Send him to consultation room 3, I said finally. Tell him I'll be there in 10 minutes. I stood outside the glass door of that consultation room for 5 full minutes before I could bring myself to go in. My father looked like a completely different man. He had aged a decade in 2 years. His hair was completely gray now, thin and wispy. His shoulders had a defeated slump I had never seen before. He was wearing that old navy blazer he wore to every family event, except now it hung off him like it belonged to someone twice his size. On the table in front of him was a chaotic mess of papers, foreclosure notices, collection letters, lawsuit summons, credit card statements with balances so high I could see the red numbers from outside the glass. He looked scared. Lost. Small. I took a deep breath, pushed open the door, and walked in. He looked up, and for a long moment, he didn't recognize me. I had cut my hair. I was wearing a $3,000 designer suit. Then his eyes went wide. Victoria? Hello, Dad. He scrambled to his feet, knocking papers to the floor. I didn't know this was your firm. I swear. I just searched for the best bankruptcy attorneys in Chicago. Sit down. He sat immediately. I took the chair across from him. Tell me what happened. The story came out in fragments. Bad investments. Over-leveraged properties. COVID shutting down his retail tenants. Rising interest rates crushing his mortgages. Christopher had made it infinitely worse. He'd convinced my father to invest their combined savings in a cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed overnight. They lost $400,000. Then Christopher's divorce. He'd been hiding massive debt from Megan for years. She took the house, the kids, everything. He moved back in with my parents. Mom's entire retirement fund, my father said, his voice cracking. It's gone. I used it trying to save the business, and I lost everything. I looked at the papers. The numbers were catastrophic. You owe $2.3 million. I know. Your house is in foreclosure. You have 17 separate judgments against you. I know. He couldn't meet my eyes. And you came here, to the most expensive law firm in Chicago, without knowing I worked here? The receptionist said you were the managing partner, he mumbled. I thought she meant, like an office manager or something. Of course he did. I run this entire firm, Dad. 300 attorneys work under me. Our hourly rate starts at $800. I leaned forward. And the last thing you said to me, in front of our entire family, was that I was unlovable and that no man would ever want me. Victoria. Do you remember that? Do you remember the 43 people who watched you humiliate me? Do you remember telling me not to come back? He was crying now. I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong. Yes. You were. I don't expect you to help me, he whispered. I don't deserve it. Why not Christopher? He's the successful one, remember? He flinched. Megan left him. He's living in our basement, drinking himself to sleep. What about all those relatives? 43 people at that table. They all said no. He stared at his hands. Funny how that works. When you're successful, everyone wants to be your friend. When you're failing, you find out who your real family is. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn newspaper clipping, my promotion announcement. Creased and faded from being folded hundreds of times. I carry this everywhere, he said. I show it to strangers. That's my daughter. She's the youngest managing partner in her firm's history. You tell strangers. But you never called me. I didn't think you wanted to hear from me. I didn't. But maybe I wanted you to try anyway. He broke down sobbing. And I realized something. This was never about earning his approval. It was about who I wanted to be. Did I want to be someone who turned away her own father at his lowest moment? No. I'll take your case, I said. His head snapped up. What? Pro bono. But understand this, I'm not doing it because you're my father. I'm doing it because everyone deserves competent legal representation. Even people who don't deserve it. He nodded, tears streaming. And next Thanksgiving, when you're sitting at that table with all the relatives, I want you to tell them the truth. That your daughter, the unlovable one, saved your house and your future. That I did it because I'm a better person than you ever taught me to be. I walked to the door. Victoria, he called. I stopped. I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to say it, but I'm so proud of you. I stood there, feeling the weight of words I had waited my entire life to hear. They didn't change anything. I was already proud of myself. I'll have my associate contact you, I said. And Dad? Wear a better suit next time. This is a professional establishment. Epilogue. We resolved the bankruptcy in 9 months. My parents kept their house. My father works as a consultant now. He calls every Sunday. Christopher got sober. He's rebuilding his relationship with his kids. At Thanksgiving this year, my father stood up and gave a toast. To my daughter, Victoria, he said, his voice trembling. Who taught me that success isn't measured by marriage or children. It's measured by integrity. Persistence. Grace under fire. Everyone clapped. My mother cried. I smiled and raised my glass. I did meet someone, a federal judge, smart and funny. He asked me to dinner 8 months ago. My father asked to meet him. Maybe someday, I said. Does he treat you well? I smiled. He treats me like I'm enough. Good, my father said. Because you always were, Victoria. I looked at the magazine cover on my wall, Chicago's most powerful attorneys, Victoria Lawson. No, Dad. I wasn't always enough. But I am now. And that's all that matters.